Hello, folks. Welcome to This Week in History with Mike and Will. I'm Mike.
I'm Will.
And it's This Week in History, where we look up an event from history. Will looks it up, and then he tells me about it.
Yeah.
And he has 1 hour to explain it to me.
And this week I promise to try to stay in time.
Let's see if it happens. So this week we're discussing Stirling Castle.
Stirling Castle in Scotland.
In Scotland, 1304. I know nothing about this.
Yep.
You've got 1 hour, Will. Ready?
Ready. Okay, Stirling Castle. So, we're about to talk about the Scottish Wars of Independence a little bit.
Okay.
These are made famous in the film Braveheart.
Independent from England?
Independence from England, yes. Where they technically were sort of independent already, but then weren't, but then were. It's a whole thing. So we're going to talk a little bit about that because we have to know why we're going to Stirling Castle.
Sure.
But Stirling Castle is, just to describe the structure itself, is this.
Oh.
Yeah, mark it down. And it, as you can see, it's on a massive volcanic cliff on three sides, with the castle on top of the cliff. It is like in the middle of an open plain of nothingness by a river. So it's got like it looks fake. It looks like if you're walking through the area as like a soldier, you'd be like, that should not be. It's like nature just went, here's a castle.
I didn't know that there was any volcanic activity in Scotland.
Well, there's not a lot, but a
enough.
long time ago.
Okay.
Long time ago, before Scotland was a place.
Ooh, that's a very American song.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's, I got nothing. I don't know enough Scottish songs.
You have 1 hour.
I have 1 hour, and if I tried to do a Don McLean song, that's half that glass.
That's right.
So, Stirling Castle, though, is set up on top of this crazy cliffs on three sides thing. It is very imposing.
Good place for a castle, I
without
imagine.
having a castle.
Yeah.
But then you put a castle on top of that, and you can see for miles and miles and miles and miles, and then also have this domineering position over everything. So Stirling Castle was built there, and it was seen as the kind of the gateway to northern Scotland. If you wanted to go north into like the Highlands or anything else, you had to go past Stirling Castle, and likewise going south.
Yeah.
So if you're the Highlanders and you want to go into England, you have to go through there.
Okay. You can't go like far. You'd have to go way far around.
Yes. So the concept of the castle is obviously, you can just go around it, right? But then you have a giant fortress filled with soldiers.
Well.
So they can just attack you in the rear.
Yeah.
The whole time. They can just send out raiding parties.
Sure.
Secures your lines of communications, secures your supply lines. So the idea of the castle is, okay, we want to hold this land, so we're going to stay here, so we'll build this fort. Well, now we'll make it permanent, we'll add stone, and then we can kind of have more control. We can go around it, but then you have a garrison of troops who can do whatever they want. It's a meeting place for more people, and that's a whole problem. So typically you build a series of castles, and then you'd have to crack each one open like a nut, and then take it and then go to the next one.
Right.
Otherwise, you're just leaving yourself open to attack. Castles are, at this time, kind of at the height of their construction and their usefulness. This is before we have cannons and gunpowder.
Oh, okay.
So having massive stone walls is going to stop all the things.
Stop a sword.
It'll stop a sword, definitely. The catapults of the time had a lower trajectory, like a typical catapult. It's got like the four wheels and it looks like a spoon. And
Yeah.
That's called a mangonel, and it launches it kind of a little bit up, but not super high. So what you really needed to get height was called a trebuchet.
Trebuchet.
A trebuchet. And trebuchet.
Oh, crap.
Yeah, trebuchet.
That's right. Get out. Flips it.
Yep. It's like a giant sling. It's got like a net on the bottom. You put the stone in. Typically a stone. You could do all kinds of stuff. Some people use cows.
Oh.
Because you sling a giant cow corpse over a wall, you've got disease.
Yeah.
Siege warfare's nasty.
Plus the visuals are great.
Yeah, it's just, how you doing, Jim? Oh! Jim got killed by a cow. It's like the scene in Monty Python.
Yeah.
You know.
I assume that's
cows.
what you were referring to this whole time.
Yeah.
This also actually happened.
It did literally, they did actually sling dead cattle.
I suppose that's where they got the idea from.
Human heads was a popular one, if you had them around.
If you have them lying around.
Because imagine you're just sitting there and you're like, oh, it's a catapult slinging a stone. That's not, I mean, that's what we expect. Oh, God.
Oh, it's Jerry.
That was the farmer and his whole family. So it's pretty nasty stuff.
Yeah, that's some psychological warfare.
Yeah,
that's going on.
exactly. You want to scare them.
Sure.
So siege warfare is really intense right now. So today we're going to focus on Stirling Castle specifically as a siege because it's a pretty fascinating one. But the man behind the siege.
The man behind the siege.
So to build up the man behind the siege, we got to talk about his dad.
Okay.
To talk about his dad, we also are going to talk quick about his grandfather and his great uncle.
How far back we going?
That's as far back as we're going, but I'm going to show my book that I have. The Plantagenet Chronicles.
Oh, catchy title.
Oh, the Plantagenets. Trying to get not glare. It's not going to.
You were good the first time. There.
The not glare. There we go. An angle. So this is Richard III, the Hunchback. You can see he's got the. They added a hump to it.
That's Richard III?
That's Richard III. That's a
not much of a
contemporary
hunchback.
painting. Yeah, but he's he's not alive yet. But this talks about the entire family, the Plantagenets, who started with King Henry. We've talked about him before. He's the guy who had the Archbishop of Canterbury killed allegedly.
Well, I mean,
he
Archbishop
did say
didn't walk out alive.
Yeah, he didn't. He's like, "Will somebody rid me of this turbulent priest?" And then his knights were like, "I think he wants us to kill him." And that was pretty graphic and grisly.
Sure.
So this is a line of like conqueror statesmen, for the most like some of these guys are.
So they weren't born into it. They made their way in.
So King Henry is like he's the son of this woman who basically got kicked out of England because she was a woman and she didn't have any control over everything, and she called herself Empress Matilda. And Matilda raised him for kingship. And when she and her the guy who ousted her, Stephen, actually finally settled affairs, Edward came in and was like, "I'm the king." Not just of England, but actually a chunk of France that's much bigger than England. He was a powerhouse king. He was awesome. He was the guy, he would go from castle to castle. The lords never knew when he was coming, so they could never like plot rebellion. He was a very hands-on king. He actually gave a rat's tuchus about his people, not just about getting.
Tuchus.
I'm trying not to swear so
rats,
much.
Tuchus.
I like to think that makes us a little better. If we don't,
Sure.
it's more accessible. We can say, yeah, kids can watch us. 'Cause
Sure.
we don't, swear all the time.
Actually, sidebar, when I punch the button that says kids can watch it, then it says, okay, then no one can comment on it, which is probably a good idea.
That's probably a good idea, but also we like our comments.
Right.
Although
So-
a couple weeks ago, I just got attacked by my brothers. Well, one brother yelled at me.
Feel free to comment, even if you're a kid.
We love comments. Just be respectful. If I get stuff wrong, especially, let me know. I like to know when I screw things up. Pronunciation guides are really helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Haven't had too many problems with that because if it's dicey, I either apologize beforehand.
Yeah, you're very aware of it.
Or I try to look it up.
Yeah.
But anyways, today's should be easy because it's names like Henry and Edward and Malcolm and
Henri.
which if he was French, it would be Henri. So Henry has a pile of kids. They called them the Devil's Brood.
Ooh.
Because they all committed rebellion against him. Usually just because they're like, why aren't you dead yet? We want your stuff.
Jeez.
Which is hard when you're like this powerhouse king and he just wouldn't die.
Yeah.
Like, because it's the Middle Ages. You're like, he'll be dead at 40, then I can be king. His sons were, let's see, there was John and his big brother, Richard, the Lionhearted. Who was always rebelling against his dad. We're going to do an episode about Richard the Lionhearted because he's considered one of England's great kings. He was in England a total of 6 months during his 10-year reign. He hated England. He said it was a wet land fit only for breeding sheep.
That's
he hated it.
the best kind of king is an
absentee king. And then his brother John, who eventually was called John Lackland because he kept losing territory to France. So then John is kind of the focus of this. There were other kings or sons. There was Geoffrey. He was the third. He was the other one. There was 3 sons, but Geoffrey was the bastard. He was the bastard. He was out of wedlock. He's like a half brother. So Richard was not always well behaved and loyal to his wife, who is Eleanor of Aquitaine, who is possibly the toughest woman ruler of her time.
This feels like I've been dumped into the middle of a soap opera.
It is. It's a medieval soap opera. I can't wait to talk
more
about
characters that I can keep track of.
But we don't need it. We don't really need. She's not a huge focus. It's just that this is the lineage that has created this guy.
Okay.
So then we have John Lackland. He's not nearly the warrior his brother was. He is not the mind that his brother Jeff was. Jeffrey was kind of seen as a schemer. He's very smart, but he died young, I believe, in a tournament.
Oh.
Jousting tournaments were savage.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't plate armor. This is chainmail. That doesn't really stop a spear.
They're playing for keeps.
And they're playing for keeps. And tournaments at the time, they typically devolved into a melee, which you're hitting at each other with a blunted sword, which is still a sword.
Yeah.
And you're still a guy who's trained to swing a sword for a long time, so you're just beating each other senseless with a sword.
Fun times.
So he sustained an injury and died from it. So moving down the line now, we've got John, though. He's considered a potentially amazing king, but he was selfish. He was capricious. He would go from one idea to the next really, really fast. He'd be really excited about something, and then once it started to happen, he'd get super depressed and kind of pull back, almost like he was hedging his bets emotionally. So he was just kind of...
I know that feeling.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, so he's an ineffective king.
Yeah.
It's fine if that's maybe just you, but if you're in charge of a country...
Yeah, that's true. We should be the more decisive.
John is famous as being Prince John from Robin Hood. He's a bad guy. He did sign the Magna Carta, which is considered this big, great thing for democracy, but the Magna Carta only helped nobles. It did not help the peasantry. It helped like a couple thousand people in England versus, the million people that lived in the kingdom.
Strange how big decrees like that often help.
Just the really wealthy.
Yeah.
We're like, I own all the land, and we would like to have some say over this stupid bloody king. But also we want to be able to beat up the peasants. Sign this.
Don't want to miss out on beating up peasants.
Yeah, so John is this ineffective ruler. Well, he has a son. Eventually, when John dies, his son, Henry III, takes over. Henry is considered a worse king in some ways and a better king in others. So he inherits the crown as a child in the middle of a war.
Oh no.
At one point, he literally had to go on a ship, like in a lake, with some knights to hide from an army of angry peasants.
How old of a child?
Like 7.
No, that's pretty young to be
I think
king.
he might have been 9. So either way, 7 or 9, not
Birthday.
enough age difference to matter.
Yeah.
He's just, I picture him in his dad's crown and his dad's cape. It's all too big for him. He's holding his scepter. What do we do? Fortunately, he had an amazing guy protecting him, William Marshall. Sir William Marshall he was a knight under King Henry. So he's been around for 3 generations of kings. Eventually he died because he's like 70. And
Yeah.
in the Middle Ages, that's very old. That's like 110 nowadays. And it was not an easy 70 years. He was basically wearing armor his entire life. So this is a big, strong dude. But eventually it's not a gradual decline at that age. It's a cliff.
Yeah.
So he went from big, strapping to...
Alright.
I'm wearing 50 pounds of steel.
Third king, I'm done.
I'm just done. But Henry eventually goes on to rule for... Well, he's 65 when he dies.
Oh.
And he rules for like 50 years.
50 something,
Yeah. Which is really impressive.
Yeah.
But his entire reign is marred by rebellions from the barons because they're still mad at his dad, and then they're mad at him, and they see him as kind of weak and ineffectual because he had advisors for so long. So in all of this chaos, right, where there's rebellions happening and England has lost all this credibility, because you go from Henry, who was like this lion, to Richard, who was the conqueror, to John, who lost everything, and now you've got Henry, his son, and he's seen as like the heir to the idiot, basically. He's seen as this ineffective guy. So he's dealing with
But
all
also
this
a kid.
chaos. Yeah, but he's the king. But he's like dealing with all this chaos,
Yeah.
right? And the barons are just sick of it. They have 2 rebellions. He's born in the first one, and inherits the kingdom in the first one. That just sucks. And then he has to fight another one. So raised in all of this is his son, Prince Edward.
Prince Edward.
Edward, the Lord Edward, as he was called at the time. He eventually will become king. So this is Edward the First, is what we're talking about. Now, Edward is raised with this lineage. He's got Henry back there. A few generations before that, he has William the Conqueror. He has the blood of greatness kind of a thing. He's got the same fighting ideals as Richard the Lionheart, who was his great uncle. He tries probably not to think about his grandfather, who was an idiot, but still king.
Yeah.
Right? And John just has like a history of just failed campaigns. It's not good. I don't think he won a battle. Like his most famous battle was he besieged one of his own castles.
Hey,
And he needed France to help him do it.
guys, I know how to get in here. I know the passcodes.
And it took forever. It took forever to do it.
Oh, they changed my
And
password.
they held it with like 10 guys. So he's not a great general. He's not, but like I said, he had those sparks of brilliance. So we see this kind of go down the lines into Edward. Distill all of these character traits into Edward. He's passionate. He's very strong. Okay. This guy is 6'2" in the Middle Ages. So I'm 6 feet and people think I'm big now.
Yeah.
He's 6'2", and he has trained his entire life for war. Like, that's a mandatory, if you're a king, you need to be able to fight.
Okay.
He's also raised, personally thinking that because of, well, his dad was like 9, and he had to be in a war.
Yeah.
So his dad was probably like, teach him how to use a sword, teach him how to use a bow,
You wanna
teach
know
him how war
right
works.
away.
I don't want him to have to deal with the same stuff I had to deal with, and also, I want a loyal son who can help me fight these wars.
Yeah.
And Edward is very loyal to his father, except for one little thing. Now, in a family where rebelling against your dad literally means taking up arms and killing people, his was basically the barons. This was during a time of peace with the barons, although the most wealthy landowners came forward and said, we want you to do this, 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 and this to secure our rights, and kind of they wanted to take some power from the king. Edward agreed with them.
Good idea.
Take some, which is interesting because he's going to be king.
Yeah.
But it was probably a matter of the barons went to him. He's like 18.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, your dad has all this control over you and your lands right now. If you side with us right now, you'll get XYZ benefits.
Oh, sure.
Not thinking long term, well, this will screw me over when I'm king, and then I'll have to deal with all this crap.
Or maybe thinking that when I'm king, I could change it back.
Also, yes.
I mean, that's what I would think.
Also, yes. Because we find out Edward does change his mind a lot.
Yeah.
He's not above, I don't like this
Hey,
anymore.
man.
I'm a king.
When you're king, you can do what you want.
Good to be the king.
It's good to be the
Good
king.
to be the king. Mel Brooks said it best. It's good to be the king. So Edward sides with the barons, says, yeah, this is... Dad, I think this is what we should do.
Sure.
His dad does not appreciate that. And they fall out for a little bit.
Oh.
Well, then war comes.
Yep.
As it always does.
Yeah.
Because the king's like, no, I'm not doing this. I'm King Henry. I'm named after Henry the First. He was bad, tough, and so I'm sick of you barons pushing me around. Since I was born into being treated like crap by you people. I've had enough. So they have a war.
He starts it.
He pretty much, well, he says no, and that's seen as the reason.
Okay.
The barons then go, fine, then we're just...
I guess we're doing war.
I guess we're going to go to war. And since kings don't have private armies at this time, almost all of your power as king is based on, I own all the land, and I lease it out to all of you as the lords, and then you lease it out to lesser lords and knights, and then they lease it out to the peasants.
Yeah. And they can do whatever
And
they want.
can do whatever they want.
Probably farming.
Almost exclusively subsistence farming. Just enough.
Peasants.
Peasants. Bloody peasants. Shouldn't have been born a peasant.
Yeah. Should have thought ahead.
Should have thought ahead. That's why family planning is important.
That's right.
Right?
Think ahead before you're born.
Why didn't you plan better, in utero? You fail. So, by the way, today's coffee once again brought to us by Lock, Stock, and Bagel.
Speaking
Got
of
some
in
bread?
utero.
I got to talk to him about a $5 coffee sponsorship.
Okay.
I think when we have more viewers, we could maybe do that.
Okay.
So share and subscribe.
Sure.
We'll talk about this later. All right. So Edward then says, "Well, you can't fight my dad," and he joins forces with his father. He's like, "Well, since we're talking war now, this is a little different.
Yeah.
This is we're not having conversations anymore. We're having battles." So he joins up with Dad, and they fight. Now there's a battle. Which I should have written down the battle, but it's during the Second Barons' War, and it's kind of this big battle, and the responsibility of most battles are split up into I should say armies. Sorry, I'm going to start this over. So in battles, the armies are usually split up between like the center, the flanks, and then like a reserve contingent usually.
Yeah. Okay.
At this time, this is when big pitched battles occur, where you line up in front of your other guys and you charge and kill each other in the middle, like gentlemen. So the center is seen as like this is the main fighting, but this is the holding point. This is where we're going to have the scrum. And then the flanks, like the right flank was considered prestigious and usually like cavalry. The flanks were usually cavalry. And then you sometimes have archers behind that. And then you have reserves in the back of, a few hundred extra guys to plug the gaps when you have problems. They sit back. Maybe we should go help those guys.
I hope I don't have to go in there.
Yep.
That looks real pointy.
The way the Romans used to do is they have the best guys in reserves. Use up the weak guys, weed out the weak, and then they send in the elites.
Hey, I got chosen for the front. Yay!
Yay.
No, that means...
That sucks. You have worse armor, worse training, worse food. The guys with the best kit are standing behind you with a spear going, forward, come on. Don't make me come in here. I'll have to kill you too. But by this time, the reserves are usually... sometimes they're light cavalry, so they can move quickly. Or more often just a pile of infantry and some knights to kind of plug the gap. Because knights are shock troops. They're not really great at, okay, we got to plug the gap. And I got to ride through all of these guys and try to get in the middle. And
they're on their horse.
They're on a horse, they're in heavy armor. So they're put where they can do the most damage. So Edward's put in charge of the right flank, and he carves through the Baron's army and breaks his enemy flank. And he pursues him into the woods, and he's hacking away with a sword, and his guys are with him, and they're like, yeah, we crushed him! And they turn around, and his side lost the battle.
Oh, no.
His dad is captured, and he's like, but we won! I won! And I'm like, well, you're outnumbered like the rest of the battle to you.
Oh, no.
And some guys, and he's like, well, crap. So he has to surrender.
Aw.
And the barons basically keep the king prisoner. And they're like, well, we won.
Yeah.
So they run the country for a little bit. Edward, being young, fit, and savvy, he's also, like I said, he's savvy. He's very smart. He bides his time and acts like he's a good little prisoner. So they start having less restrictions on him. So he can wander around freely.
Yeah, sneaky Edward.
He basically jumps out a window and escapes.
Bye.
Gets on a horse, rides off, and gets an army together. And he's like, this time, I'm going to be in charge, and I'm not going to lose.
Because I won that last time.
I won that last time. I did a really good job. And everybody's like, Prince Edward, this guy's awesome. Because he's like 20-something. He's huge. He's a warrior. And he basically says, let's go save my dad.
Good looking too.
And actually, by the
Do we know that?
they have we'll show it right here. That's what he looks like. At least when he died.
Well,
because that's the sarcophagus that he's entombed in.
okay.
And those are typically like carved at the right time to go, this is what he looked like in life. So it's not like I could show the paintings of it. Well, I'll do that right here.
Yeah.
Not a handsome guy by that drawing because it's all. For some reason, they didn't draw very lifelike, and that was kind of frowned on. Like, only God should make humans look lifelike. If an artist does it, you're going to hell.
Oh.
That's kind of how the church viewed that. They didn't do...
Yeah, the church has always been weird about it.
A little bit weird about art. Bonfire of the Vanities, all that stuff. So, Edward gets an army together, rides back in, fights the barons, crushes them. It is a super one-sided.
Is his dad still a prisoner?
His dad's still a prisoner. His dad's not only a prisoner, his dad's on the field of battle dressed as one of their soldiers.
Oh.
Edward's like, find my dad! He's killing everybody else, and a knight switches sides and protects the king. He's like, okay, you're the king. Okay, come over here.
This feels like a big chess match.
It is. It really is, because it's whose king is winning.
Yeah.
He wins the battle, and he's fighting against a guy who at the time was considered one of the flowers of chivalry, one of the best knights, Simon de Montfort, or Simon de Montfort. Simon de M-O-N-T-F-O-R-T, Montfort. Now there's Simon the Older, Simon the Younger. Not very original names. Younger Simon and Edward have had battles before, and Edward beat him. So now he's going after Daddy. Now the younger has fled. Now he goes for Simon de Montfort, he's like the head of this rebellion. Beats his army, saves his father. Simon de Montfort is executed and mutilated. Now I had to look up what they specifically meant, and this took some digging to figure out what they meant. They cut off his head, his hands, and his testicles. Publicly on the battlefield.
In that order?
I think so.
Well,
I
okay.
don't think they might have castrated him first.
Yeah, see, that'd be worse.
I feel like they'd probably castrated him
Yeah,
first.
reverse order would be
Yeah,
worse.
that would be much worse. That would be much worse, you know. And then,
Yeah.
balls, well, head, hands, and head. It's just a different direction.
Anyway.
But yeah, so he was literally physically emasculated in front of, like, the barons that survived. Doesn't say it was by Edward himself, but I like to think Edward was right there going, cut his balls off in front of everybody. Like, because the king would determine that, right?
Was it a normal punishment?
That was not a normal punishment.
That seemed excessive.
That is. I mean, treason. The punishment at the time was hanging, drawing, and quartering. That's when they hang you until you're half dead. Drawing is drawing out your insides through your stomach, which is awful. And then they rip you into pieces or cut you into pieces. Usually they cut your head off first. Sometimes they don't. Yeah, it's violent. But this sets a precedent because he does stuff like this later. So Edward probably had a hand in, don't just kill him, mangle him, and then kill him in front of the barons. Let's send a message.
Send a message, yeah.
So then he's like, well, what's a young prince to do after he's crushed the rebels and done all this? And he eventually meets Simon the Younger, and they come to terms, and basically the rebellion ends. There's some little skirmishes and fights after this, but this is this big battle to kind of finalize who's in charge. And Edward is seen as, like, the hero. He saved his dad, he raised the army, he ended this rebellion, he maintained the line of kings. He's pretty awesome. So feeling pretty good about himself, he decides to, what they call, take up the cross, which means go on a crusade. It's like, well, I won here, let's see if I can go retake the Holy Land.
Let's try the old crusade again.
That always
Those
works.
were fun.
Because his great uncle, Richard the Lionheart, achieved his title from crusading. Like, that's what he got. That's like where he got famous. If he hadn't gone on crusade, he would have gone down in history as just a rebel who screwed his dad over nonstop until his dad died from a broken heart.
Wow.
Pretty much. Yeah. So Edward's like, I need to build my cred a little more.
Yeah.
So he's still in his 20s. He goes off to crusade. By the time he's gotten there, the Crusaders' state is literally just the fortress of Acre, which is spelled acre, like an acre of land. It's a very impressive fortress city. When the Crusaders took it, they literally had to tear it apart brick by brick. Like, soldiers were paid for every stone they pulled from the wall to try to bring this thing down.
Wow.
They finally got in. They killed everybody. Richard Lionheart was in charge of this. He massacred a whole bunch of people. Like, it was really gross and really, really bad.
That'll get them to believe in Christ.
Yeah. Nothing says Jesus like mass murder.
Yep.
Like, yeah. So everything goes wrong during this crusade. This is the 9th crusade. Okay? Only the first crusade was objectively, strategically successful. Because the goal of the first crusade was take Jerusalem. And they did.
Yeah.
Every other thing beyond that was don't let anybody else take Jerusalem. And they failed. After the Second Crusade, Jerusalem fell to Saladin, and it's just from then on, the Turks control everything. Then this group called the Mamluks show up, and these guys are, as much as fighting as the conventional Turks were, these guys are just warriors. And they're led by a guy named Baybars, who was like a slave, rose out of slavery as just a killing machine, and super fanatically anti-Christian. Just hated these foreign invaders. I don't even know if he was anti-Christian, but he was anti-white Europeans in his land.
Yeah, I could see how you would develop that opinion.
Yeah, just... Why? What do you mean?
I don't
understand why you would have...
These guys that keep showing
Why
up
are
every
they
so
so
often.
irrationally hateful of these guys who showed up and killed all their people all the time? So yeah, this guy has not had a good life, but he's like a frontline killing machine warrior guy. That's his thing. And he's also a really good strategist. So he's slowly dismantling the Crusader states. Just bit by bit, just going in, taking cities. And that's who they're up against, is Baybars, who's scary. Not to be confused with Babar, the elephant.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally different. Might be spelled the same, but it's a totally different guy. This is not a nice, happy elephant in a green suit and a crown. This is a killing machine with a scimitar who's very good at what he does. Little column B, pretty similar. Pretty interchangeable. Edward teams up with this king of France, who is considered, I think he became a saint. He's one of the Louis. not a great warrior. Go figure. When all you do is wear burlap and just starve yourself, and then you get typhoid.
No one wears burlap.
He wore burlap.
What?
Yes, he wore like a burlap sack under all his clothes. So to show humility and poverty. And he usually just lived...
chafing.
Yeah, and chafing. That was the thing. That was, you're supposed to suffer to show your fealty to God.
Yeah, you do you, I
Yes.
guess.
Well, they had these guys, they're called flagellants. They would just walk around whipping themselves. Monty Python made a spoof of that where they hit themselves in the face with a board. People did stuff like that. Like, pain shows I love God. Because Jesus was big on that, right? I remember reading in the Bible, Jesus was like, I want you to beat yourselves non-stop to show your faith in me and God. I don't know why he's kind of British, but... Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are those who beat themselves. Blessed are the sadomasochists.
I think you're...
For they shall inherit the whips.
I know there's lots of interpretations of Jesus, but...
I don't remember him being
yours
kinky.
is pretty wrong.
I don't think that was right. I feel like I missed
Something.
No. You know what? That was like the S&M Bible.
Oh,
That was a different thing altogether. But yeah, no. Jesus was not all about that, so I don't get where they have this kind of apocalyptic suffering view.
Yeah.
And some of these guys were just raving madmen. I mean, we have that nowadays, but imagine no medication, no therapy, and people just, I heard Jesus tell me, kill myself. I'm gonna beat myself up. And this is a time when it's rational to just slaughter everybody who's different than you.
Oh.
I mean, we still have people like that nowadays, unfortunately. Looking at you, psycho-evil people who just think it's rational to murder everybody.
Not naming any names.
Not naming any names, but
you know who you are.
I don't think any of them watch this
I don't
show.
think so either.
History? What's that? I don't like it. So, yeah, we have just this kind of senseless slaughter. This king, the French king, is the boss. He's in charge.
Yeah.
He's got an army. Well, the army dissolves after he dies because he's wearing burlap. He's not eating. He catches like typhus and then just dies horribly, probably diarrheaing himself to death. Very pleasant way to go. Glamorous,
very
as
French.
always. I think he dies in Tunisia, so he doesn't even get to the Holy Land. He gets to North Africa and dies. The Crusaders go back to Sicily and just kind of are in a holding pattern, just waiting, like, well, what are we going to do next? Edward catches, like, the plague, or typhus, I think is the typhoid fever seemed to be what you got then. He's sick, so he has to wait. He goes to Accra, and he's like, so what are we doing? Actually, he catches typhus after this. Sorry. He goes to Accra first, looks down, he's like, so, this is the only city we have. How big's our army? And they have like a few thousand guys, including his 1,000 men. That's about all he brought with him.
You counting your guys?
Yep. Yeah, we got, how many guys we got? 3,000. How was that? Including, and then we add in my guys? No, that's counting your guys. That's everybody we have. Well, what about our allies? That's including our allies. Well, nope. So they end up sending messengers to the Mongols.
Oh.
And they're like, do you guys want to help us kill some Turks?
Mongols.
And the Mongols are like, yeah, we like to fight. We like to kill people. Sure.
Yeah, all right.
Fine. So the Mongols kind of send a half-hearted attack. But Baybars is, again, very smart and very war-savvy. He knows where to go. And he figures, oh, they'll try the Mongols.
Oh.
And they're very similar, like warrior heritage, horse archers. It's a very similar kind of combat.
Yeah.
So, but this is his land, his territory. He's used to this. The Mongols are used to steppes. This area, they're like fighting in Syria around a city called Aleppo. It's a lot more rocky, mountainous, rough terrain. So Baybars is able to drive off the Mongols, and Edward basically just leads a series of raids and small attacks, but he's never in a big battle in the Holy Land.
Yeah.
Eventually, he gets sick and has to stop fighting. He doesn't die.
Oh, okay.
He doesn't die because he's strong and didn't wear just burlap and drink boiled leaf stew or whatever King Louis did to show his loyalty to God. He's like, no, I think I should probably stay healthy because we're going to war.
Yeah.
And I probably should eat some food.
And I got a little bit of plague, but I'm okay.
Yeah, I'm fine. So it takes him a bit to recover, but he's
Sure.
still young. He's in he's like late 20s now. I think he's actually 30. He's about 30 right now. And eventually, after all this fighting and everything, they all basically said, well, this is hopeless. There's no way we're going to beat Baybars. His army is colossal. He's going to eventually win the situation. We can't really do much until we get more support. So he's like, well, I guess I'll go home because I'm sick. I got to recover, and I'll try to rally more guys. Plus, I left my dad with the barons, and I don't trust them.
Oh.
And nobody's helping him out. So he's like, well, there's only so much I can do. So he does what he can do, realizes this isn't going to go anywhere right now, heads home. He's sick. He takes him a little bit to get home. On his way home, he gets a message his dad died.
Oh, no.
He is really bummed by this and basically drags his feet walking home.
But he's king now.
But he's king, but he's not excited about it because it meant that his daddy had to die. And he liked his dad.
Sure.
Which is weird in this family because it's a history of rebellions and crappy dads who treat their kids horribly and sons who try to murder their fathers and just awfulness. And here's like an actual like, I loved my dad.
Aw.
It's actually kind of one of the only heartwarming Edward the First's things. Well, Edward comes back as a crusader, as the guy who crushed the Barons' rebellion, and the guy who beat the plague, basically. And he cleans house. He's like, this is what we're going to do. He sets up several reforms that make it easier for him to get stuff done. He sets up some parliamentary reforms. He does a lot of law reformation to try to smooth things over, and he tries to set up different like marriages to tie people together.
Okay, so he's liked by people. He takes charge as being king. And he does.
He gets
king
stuff.
stuff.
He gets stuff done too.
Yeah.
The Baron's like, oh, maybe this won't be so bad. Dun dun dun.
Oh.
Now at this time in Scotland, we have King Alexander III. Alexander is a pragmatic king. He's a long-lived king. He's got a bunch of kids, and they all die.
Oh.
He's got a daughter left, Lady Margaret. She is like 7. She lives in Norway because she's Norwegian.
Okay.
One of his wives is Norwegian. He's got a couple of wives that he goes to because they all die. So she's off in Norway getting an education. She's just a kid.
Sure.
I think one of his sons died from like a riding accident. So it's like, basically, you get a bad internal injury, you die. You fall off a horse wrong, you can die. You break your leg, you bleed in your leg, sepsis, and it's horrible.
Yeah, they don't know how to fix the inside of you.
Things. No, they're like, oh, just stab him, draw some blood, he'll be fine.
Put some leeches on him.
But he's already bleeding. Yeah, just pull the blood out. Get the bad blood out, and the good blood will come back. It's fine.
Yeah.
God's got this. Don't worry about it. Calm down. You guys are freaking out over this.
God's on our side. We're doing those crusades for a reason. Come on.
Come on. But have we won lately?
Give him the leeches.
Maybe if we'd won the crusade, God would care.
Maybe. Fight harder.
Somebody go fight harder, fight better, win the war. This is stupid. So Alexander, though, the way that things have been progressing with England is Scotland gets along with England. They are nominally subservient to England. It's called a suzerainty, where like the bigger kingdom kind of is in charge, but they don't really like go, you owe us money and you owe us this, but we're technically your boss.
Okay.
Scotland doesn't pay like a huge amount of tax or anything like that. And Alexander is Edward's brother-in-law through his wife. Like his wife is sister to, I think, Edward's wife. Something like that. So it's not like one of them married the other's sister. It's like their wives are siblings, and then that makes them connected. So they get on well. Well, Alexander dies.
Oh.
With a 7-year-old girl as his heir.
Oh, she's the heir.
She is summoned
From Norway.
Now, Alexander, typically the rules were, if you're the king of Scotland, you had to pay homage to the king of England, which means you're technically my boss. It's a really formal way of saying you're my boss. It's not even just technically. I swear fealty to you. You tell me what to do, I do what you tell me to do.
Yeah.
The kings, usually this is just a formality. This hasn't been like pushed.
We don't like to push Scotland.
We don't like to push
Scotland doesn't like to be pushed.
Scotland doesn't like to be pushed. Exactly. And they do actually kind of get on. But the Scots are a fierce, independent people.
Yep.
William the Conqueror nominally beat them up and was like, all right, this is done. We're not going to do this anymore. Okay? and I don't want to fight anymore.
Okay.
Okay? So that's the way things
All
are.
right.
I'm in charge, but you guys do your own thing,
Yeah.
just as long as you still say I'm technically a higher king. You still have a king.
Yep.
You still have your laws, your rules, your everything else. But if there's a huge emergency and I call for you, help me out. And if you have a problem, I help you out.
Yeah.
It's kind of a mutual respect thing. So, this is the state of affairs. It's not causing any problem. Now, the Scottish people don't care. They're peasants. They don't go, oh, well, the politics of England. The politics of England. How dare they tell our lords what to do? They don't care. They have to pay taxes to their lords. It doesn't matter.
It all goes upstream
It
somewhere.
all goes, they're at the bottom of the food chain.
Yeah.
They could not care less. This has not become like an untenable situation where the lords are riding through our lands, killing our flocks, stealing our women, raping our children, and doing all manner of nastiness. None of that's going on. Okay? I mean, it probably is,
Sure.
but like, it's a local Scottish guy doing it.
Right.
It's not like, the English, they have killed everyone. It's not bad yet. It gets bad. Because when Alexander dies, his daughter's supposed to come over, take over for him. Well, she's
Yeah.
7. She's
Yeah.
small.
The Norwegian.
She's weak. She's sick. She dies on the boat.
Oh no.
Lady Margaret's dead.
Poor Lady
No
Margaret.
heir to the throne.
Oh, no.
Scotland is on the brink of meltdown. They're like, we don't have a king. We don't have a queen. We've got a new one. Who's in charge? 14 claimants up for the throne come out and say, I'm the next in line.
Oh boy.
But it really boils down to 2 guys. John Balliol.
That's still one too many.
That's one too many. It's a very good point. So it's split down to 2 guys, John Balliol, the Balliol clan, and Robert de Bruce, Debrus. Not to be confused with Robert the Bruce. That's his grandson. This is the 5th Robert de Bruce. Then there's one more Robert de Bruce, and then they switch it to the Bruce. Like it's a title then.
Yeah.
It stops being of Bruce and starts being the Bruce. Oh, aye. He's the
The
Bruce. The Bruce Wayne.
Who's the Bruce now?
He's the Bruce. I'm
Who's
the
the other?
Bruce.
Who's the other guy?
John Balliol. Balliol. Now, because Edward is kind of seen as being in charge, they call him in as an arbiter.
Okay.
Can you help us sort this out? Edward's like, yeah, my great-grandfather used to do this all the time.
Oh, this is
Henry
fun.
the First used to be like the elder statesman. Anytime anybody had a fight, they called Henry, he came in.
I'm just glad for the invite, and it's not a war.
So, yeah, and Edward's like, he sees this as a great opportunity because he really does want to go back on crusade. But to do that, he figures, I'll secure Scotland.
Okay.
They'll help.
Oh.
By showing that I can help secure Scotland, that gives me credit with the French, then the French can help me.
Oh.
That means Spain will probably help,
He's got a whole plan here.
and then we'll all link together,
Mm-hmm.
and we will go reconquer Jerusalem.
Jesus.
Jesus, for Jesus. We're going to kill everybody for Jesus. Peace for Jesus, which is legit, and then murder for Jesus, which is
Less
significantly
legit.
less legit. I'm still looking in the Bible for passages where Jesus is like, kill everybody. Pretty sure he was just like, stop hurting.
It's in the subtext, man.
It's the
in the
you gotta read. When he's beating those money changers in the temple, he's really saying, kill the Muslims. But they weren't a people that, doesn't matter, kill the Muslims. I don't know why they're Southern.
I don't know.
It seems like that's the angry Southerner Bible approach. Kill the Muslims, kill those. Can we just stop killing people? No! Well, what if they're all dead? We'll find other people to kill. Those Jesus people aren't our Jesus people. We
I
kill
hope no
them
one
too.
with that accent is watching this video. I'm very offended at you.
Yeah, well, that's how it rolls. I'm sorry. It just always seems to be the thing.
Some very nice person from West Virginia. It's like,
It's like, what did I
didn't sound like that.
what did I ever do to you, Will? I ain't done nothing but being nice.
I was your biggest fan.
I was your biggest fan. All I ever said was Jesus was a good guy and we should all
unsubscribe.
be friends and be nice, and you go make fun of me. Sorry, Cletus. I didn't mean to make fun of you. I assume it's Cletus.
Yeah, probably.
That's
Sounds like
But
Cletus.
yes, not to disparage the entire South.
Right.
Just
Too
those
late.
people that are like that. Anyway, so he comes in, and he's the arbiter. It's basically split between like a pile of guys. I think it's like 40, and 40 for Balliol, 40 for Bruce, and then like 20 some odd guys come in with Edward to kind of suss out all the issues. And finally they come out with Balliol's in charge. So John Balliol's crowned king in, I think, 1292. Balliol becomes king. Almost immediately, this causes problems. Edward no longer has any connection to the Scots. He's technically their overlord, and he made Balliol king.
Oh.
By that line, he's king. All y'all work for me now. This starts to chap the Tookuses of the Scots. The Scots
You're
like,
supposed to be the arbitrator.
wait a
not
minute, we brought you in to negotiate, not to take over. So he turns this into the equivalent of a corporate takeover.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's like, because the Scots were like, well, you're technically our overlord, but we've always had a good relationship, so this isn't a problem.
Right.
And they're like, okay, cool.
Sure.
And now you're technically trying to say that you're the overlord, but we don't have a king, so it's fine because we'll go back to this. We'll circle back and talk about it when we actually have a king. Well, now they actually have a king. It took them 6 years to pick a king. Is 1286 is when Alexander died. So now 1292, they're like, oh God, crap. Remember when we said we would talk about this? I guess it's that day.
Wow, that's a long time to go without a king.
Yeah, 6 years of basically just the Scots squabbling, and it almost was a civil war.
Yep.
Like it got tense, and it's still tense. The guys who the De Bruce faction is not a fan of the Balliol faction at all. Like they're almost fighting, all the time. But Robert De Bruce himself is like, okay, I'm cool with this. I'm cool with this.
I don't ever trust it when someone in power says that.
Now
They never are.
He eventually dies, and his son,
Oh.
Robert de Bruce the Sixth,
Okay.
Earl of Annandale, or the Lord of Annandale. That's the town, Annandale. He steps in, and he's even more like, "We'll do what Edward says."
Okay.
He knows Edward is a powerhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Because during this time, while they're all sorting that out, Edward secures England, but then he goes, well, the Welsh have always been a problem.
Uh-oh. Why are we bringing the Welsh into this?
Well, it touches England, and he wants it.
Okay.
And the Welsh, have raided England and fought, because they're tired of people invading their land.
Yeah.
And we talked about Wales. Wales is rough country. It is like mountains and marshes, and there's not a lot of others. Like, it's tough. It's tough to live there. So its people are tough, and they don't appreciate a bunch of foreigners coming into the land trying to take it over.
Sure.
Well, Edward disagrees. Edward figures, like, he's got a rebellion on his hands. He deals with the rebellion, and then later on, he decides, okay, I'm not going to do a rebellion anymore. It's like 1277 is he deals with this rebellion.
Just
He's like,
kidding.
okay, all right, the rebellion stopped. And then in like 7 years later, the Welsh go into another rebellion. He's like, nope, all right, last time I put down the rebellion. This time I'm conquering it like it's a foreign country.
Oh.
He goes in and he has 13 castles at least built. And it's the same concept of this is to secure territory. And these things are massive. There's the castle of Caernarfon, which, right there.
Oh.
Because it's a really cool castle. And he gets this guy named James St. George to be his builder. James is considered one of the greatest architects of the European Middle Ages. He is a brilliant castle engineer. These things are almost impregnable. He takes ideas from like Asian castles, where in like the Middle East they have arrow slits built into the walls. So it's not just a wall, it also allows you to shoot people when they're coming at you. So he builds these things. If you try to fight it with a full army, you're probably going to struggle. If you're just a guerrilla faction, you're not even going to touch it. They fortify towns like this. It's rings of defenses, and they call them concentric castles. It's a big wall on the outside, and then the inside isn't even just like a big tower. It's another chunk of walls and towers all built together. The whole thing, each tower is like independently a castle.
Wow.
They're very tough. They put them in big rocky positions, and then they build towns around them, and then they build walls around those. It's fortification heaven. And because they've got all these mountains, they can mine right out of them.
Oh, yeah.
They can quarry all this stone. And the Welsh are like, well, crap. And then they just send a bunch of English people to live there. They colonize this land. That's how he dealt with that. This James St. George is very important to Edward because he's his castle guy. This is going to come into effect very soon. So things are building up in Scotland now, and he's dealt with rebellions his whole life. Edward knows how rebellions work. He doesn't really like this. Finally, the Scots are like, you know what? This is stupid. We're going to fight you. And they have a big fight. It's called the Battle of Dunbar, where basically several hundred Scottish knights get together and attack the English. The English kind of withdraw, and the Scots are like, oh, they're running away.
Ha!
They weren't running away, they were just repositioning.
Oh.
So basically, the Scots come charging crazy down the hill, and the English are a solid mass moving forward in perfect formation. And the Scots are like, oh, crap.
Oh, no.
The English charge into them so hard and so fast, it ends the battle in less than like 5 minutes.
Ooh.
It scatters the whole Scottish army. They only note that one guy died. So the Scots might not have actually lost anybody except one guy.
Oh.
They just scatter. It
Okay.
completely shatters their resistance. And the Scots had built up this army because Edward marched into Scotland, went to the town of Berwick, and burnt it to the ground, basically. Like, he burnt half of it and killed, like, hundreds of people. Because he was like, no, you guys try to fight with me, you guys try to mess with me, I'm going to burn your land. Now, this was technically caused because Scotland did invade England.
Yeah.
So just before this, Scotland invaded. I did this a little out of order.
Oh, okay.
What causes this all to come to a head is Edward's plans for a crusade fall apart. The French are like, no, we're not going to invade this. It's stupid. And also, we own this part of France. And Edward's like...
And also, crusades are dumb. Come on.
And Edward's like, no, that's my land. I own it. My family's owned it. I'm going to kill you. There. Scotland, you're coming with me. And Scotland says, no. We're living in Scotland. You're not our king. And in fact, they decide, this is stupid. We're on France's side.
Oh.
They not only don't help him, they team up with France and invade England.
Whoa.
They get to one castle, lose, and run away.
Yeah.
So
we made our point.
So that's when Edward goes, okay, I'm going to deal like when I fought the Welsh. I'm going to invade, I'm going to burn some towns to the ground, and I'm going to kill whoever gets in front of me. So he invades, he burns Berwick to the ground, fights the Scots, scatters them, beats them up. He eventually goes to where they keep their Stone of Destiny, the Stone of Scone.
The Stone of Destiny.
The Stone of Destiny. I feel like I should do an episode about this because it's this apparently mythical stone that the kings of Scotland all sit on and they're crowned. He takes it, brings it back to England, and puts it in a chair that he sits on. And the English kept it from 1296, this is when he beats up the Scots, till 1996.
You want your Stone of Destiny back? Sorry
For
about that.
700 years, they kept this stone that is sacred to the Scots.
I mean, if you want a sacred item, you gotta have a bigger thing.
You
than
gotta
a
have
stone.
something that can't move.
You can't just.
You
They
can't.
took our stone.
They took a rock!
Well, it was probably its destiny.
That was its destiny.
Yes.
And there's all kinds of like, it's not the real stone, it's a fake stone, it's not. It's a stone!
Yes.
I mean, it's big, but it's like.
This
it's,
stone looks like this stone.
Yeah, it's big enough for a butt to go on, and that was basically the point. It's a sitting stone.
Sure.
So it's literally put into a chair.
No, that's
Well,
nice.
I got a picture.
Oh.
There, that's easier.
Stone of Destiny.
Stone of Destiny. And they called that Edward's seat. Queen Elizabeth was crowned on this chair. So, in the 1950s. So they're still thumbing their nose at Scotland into the 1950s. Just like, oh, would you like your rock back?
In the 1950s.
Yeah, we'd really like our rock back.
You know what
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
sitting on right there?
Stone of Destiny, that's what it is. I hate her. And she married a Scotsman. You'd think that would stick in the craw of all. Just, it would be nice if we had the frickin' rock back and just keep sitting on our stone. Yeah. I just picture a bunch of really, really crabby old Scottish lord types just,
Sure.
you're so fancy with your frickin' rock that you stole from us. Where do you think you got it? Because we beat you up and took your rock.
I can also imagine
Shut up!
the people sitting down and going, glad we got this stone, but
They put a board over it,
not
and
very
then I think a
comfortable.
cushion. So it's like they're sitting above it. They're not even on it. They're like, you
Yeah.
guys are dumb. You sat on a rock? Why didn't you put a cushion on it? Defeats the point. Why? Shut up! We don't make fun of your stupid traditions.
distill destiny through a seat. Distilled destiny.
So, anyway, so he takes the stone, pretty much thinks it's done.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in 1297, a fellow named William Wallace
Hey, freedom.
shows up.
Okay.
He hates Edward passionately
He's a
because
passionate
Edward,
fellow.
after taking the stone, he takes King John Balliol and imprisons him in the Tower of London, and he's like, I'm the king. You all suck. I'm in charge. He starts setting up English lords, and he basically does what he did in Wales. He puts English lords in Scottish castles, takes things over. One of the castles he takes is Stirling, which he fortifies, which was already a terrifying fortress. He makes it even better. Well, Wallace decides he's going to start his rebellion. He teams up with a guy named Moray, who was a nobleman, and Wallace was not just some farmer. He was
Who's that? That's Moray.
That's Moray. And they fight at the Battle of Stirling Bridge. So the army in Stirling Castle is commanded by the English. It's like 10,000 guys. They come marching down, and the Scots just wait on the other side of the bridge, which the English can only come across, like three guys across. So they're marching in this little column.
Yeah.
And the Scots just wait with big spears and stab them.
Oh.
They wait till about half the army's over, then they charge in, they start killing them, and the English are like, crap!
Stupid. We didn't widen our bridges.
Wait, why did you wait till we all got here? We outnumbered you 2-1 or more. This is stupid. The Scots win. Yay, Scotland. Everything's great. And meanwhile, King Edward is like dealing with problems in France. He's dealing with this. He calms things down everywhere else so he can focus on Scotland.
I mean, these are kind of problems of his own making.
Yeah, he did. He planned all this stuff out and made everybody mad. He's also taxing people a lot to build up his armies. He goes back to Scotland, fights the Battle of Falkirk, and this time he brings 12,000 men, and half of them are Welsh longbowmen. Now, the Welsh longbowmen are terrifying. They are able to take a 6-foot-tall bow and just fire like 12 shots a minute. Wow. And we're talking, like, these arrows are not these little piddly things. They're like that big around.
Yeah.
They're like a half-inch wide.
Spears, basically.
It's basically a small spear. Yeah. And they're just firing them in the air. Now, the Scottish fighting style at this time is they'd make a schiltron, is what it's called. It looks like a hedgehog. It's a bunch of guys with spears pointing out in all directions.
Okay.
Well, the English use knights. The knights don't want to go towards spears. Meh. The longbowmen don't care. And the Scots don't wear a lot of armor. So they just pepper them full of arrows, and it's a slaughter. Like, it does not go well. This is the battle in the movie Braveheart where everybody just starts getting shot.
Yeah.
Because they just started shooting, and they didn't stop. And then as the spear formations break up, the English charge in and scatter them. Wallace goes to ground. He says he's not worthy to be the defender of Scotland anymore. He loses a lot of credibility. A few years go by, and during this time, because the main army is shattered, they all retreat to fortresses. Edward, called the Longshanks, which means because he's tall, Edward Longshanks. Longshanks just means he's very tall. He marches all through Scotland, wages several campaigns, seizing castle after castle, until he gets to Stirling. Now, Stirling Castle, in 1300, switched sides after the English had fortified it and made it better, got taken over by the Scots through, like, subterfuge.
Oh.
So he hates Stirling Castle now. And he's looking at this castle that he had reinforced and built up and made stronger.
Man, it's so nice and hard to get into.
I really wish I hadn't done that. But he saves it for last.
I wish I knew where the porthole, the
little
ventilation
did we
shaft.
Make a little thing?
Little ventilation shaft I could shoot at my...
We don't have a little thing. We don't have the little... Do we have an X-Wing to destroy the death? No? Okay, fine. So he's been waging war for a while. His original army started like 5,000 guys. It's down to 1,000 men. But
we're still doing this, guys.
Some of it was through illness. Some of it's through desertion because people are sick of fighting all the time. Yeah, and some of it's because as you take a castle, you have to leave guys behind to control it. So he's got just 1,000 guys left. Stirling Castle has 30 total. Okay. Not 30,000, 30.
We can do this, guys.
It's commanded by a man named William Oliphant, I think.
Ooh.
Yep, like Timothy Oliphant. He's a Scottish knight. He's technically the steward of the castle. He's supposed to hold it no matter what. And he can't surrender it because the Guardian of Scotland is in France right now.
And the paperwork is a nightmare.
He's in France or Italy. He might be in Italy, like seeing the Pope or something.
But either way.
He's gone. He's like, I can't surrender because my boss isn't here. I can't surrender.
You gotta come back.
I'm sorry, it's a whole thing. I can't do it.
I'd love to surrender. I just can't.
So in April of 1304, so this is 6 years on, Edward's been beating up Scotland. He gets, I guess I gotta stop.
Well, you should talk faster.
We're almost done. I should talk faster.
Okay.
So Edward circles the castle, sets up conventional siege weapons, and he's like, this is going to take forever. This is going to take forever. It's an awesome fortress.
I built that place
I built it up. It's on a giant cliff.
Yeah.
This is impossible. So after about a month of just bombarding it with like 12 different types of siege weapons, he goes to his buddy James St. George.
Hey, you design
He
castles?
says, James, you are a pro at building them. I want you to break one.
How good are you? Oh, sounds like a bank heist.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like you're the expert at making safes. I need you to crack the safe,
yeah.
right? Yeah, he's got a team. He's got to get to see. It's like an Ocean's 11. He's just going around getting the guys. How do you want to kill this castle? How do you want to? Yeah. So James says, "Well, we have a new type of castle. We have a new type of attack here. We need a new type of siege weapon."
Yes.
Now the trebuchet is an effective weapon, but it's not big enough.
Oh.
I got an idea. So he gets 5 master carpenters with 49 laborers, and it takes him 3 months to build the Warwolf.
Warwolf.
The Warwolf is a trebuchet, but modern estimates put it at 90 to 120 meters tall.
Ooh, that's tall.
That is at least almost 300 feet high.
Yeah.
That's a 30-story catapult.
It's a big. Yeah.
That is unbelievably large. That is a football field tall.
I imagine hard to sneak up on somebody with that, though.
They build it in front of Stirling Castle
Hey,
so they can see it.
we're just building this thing.
Now,
Don't worry about
we
us.
can assume that it is this big because it took 30 wagons full of materials. Like, they could move it, but it took 30 wagons to take it apart, put all the pieces and stuff, and move it around. 30 wagons pulled by, like, oxen. Moving around. So the Scots in this castle, there's 30 of them, are watching this thing come up. Going, what are they building? What is that? What do you think that is? They're building a house. That's bigger than a house. That's as tall as our castle. What are they going to do with it? That's a catapult. It's not a catapult. It's a trebuchet. Holy crap! What are they going to do with that? So they built this giant,
And they threw a castle at it.
unbelievably huge catapult, and they call it the Warwolf.
Yeah.
It's
Badass.
the loup de guerre is the French term that they called it. It's the Warwolf. This thing is so big and so scary. The Scots say, "All right, we're done. All right, you remember when we said we weren't going to surrender? We surrender. We don't want it. Nope, because they are so scared of
They didn't even use it?
the sheer size of this castle." Or of this catapult, they think it'll destroy the whole castle in one shot.
Yeah.
Now, up until then, Edward has tried everything to break into this castle. He slung a mixture of sulfur and saltpeter, which, if you mix saltpeter and sulfur together, that's gunpowder.
Oh.
So he used
so
explosives. He used explosives, and it was a mixture. So he used gunpowder, Greek fire, normal catapults. They even stripped the lead off the roofs of nearby churches because that was used as like a shingling.
Yeah.
Melted into lead balls and fired that at the castle. And it did not work. So they built this colossal trebuchet. Apparently, the stones this thing could sling weighed 295 pounds.
Ooh, the stones on that thing.
The stones on that thing. And they could sling it accurately, like really accurately, 600 and some odd feet. So they have and you cannot shoot that. It can shoot 2 football fields.
Yeah. It's like attacking someone with an asteroid.
Which is kind of funny though, because if the thing's a football field high, it basically just tips over and hits something. Like, it's huge, but it's kind of ridiculous. The Scots surrender, and this is why I absolutely love this event. King Edward says, "No. You do not deserve my grace, but must surrender to my will," he is quoted as having said on July 20th, and he sends them back to the castle because he didn't get to test his new toy.
It is pretty neat. I do want to
He says, "I spent 3 months building this thing. I didn't spend it 3 months building it to not shoot something.
Go home, pack your belongings.
Go back." And he makes them go back into the castle. And they watch this thing for the next 4 days get a little taller and finally get finished. And Edward has, like, some of the Scots are with him, probably. Some of the nobles are like, because they would have been attached to his army to show loyalty. And this is famously, or not famously because the movie's not that big, but in the movie The Outlaw King with Chris Pine, it was on Netflix, they showed this scene and it's amazing. But the catapult actually isn't quite big enough.
Oh.
And Edward basically says, watch this. He goes outside, tells the guys to fire. They sling a shot, hammer it into Stirling Castle. He says, now you can accept their surrender. But what he historically actually did do is fired it until they leveled a wall completely. So that could have been once. That could have been, I mean, it's a 300-pound rock firing at what is assumed to be about 195 kilometers an hour.
Wow.
Wow. That's like throwing like an engine block.
Yeah, through a wall.
As fast as like a race car at a stone wall. Hammers it home, the walls come down, and then he says, all right, you can surrender now. They surrender, and once again, he switches the terms. He said, if you surrender, everything's fine. He does not make everything fine. He
I've altered the plans.
takes the... Yes, pray do not alter it further. He imprisons the head of the garrison in the Tower of London. The guy's eventually released. And fights for Edward, but during the War of Independence, he gets captured by the Scots and dies in a Scottish prison.
No.
So that doesn't go well for him.
Yeah, he never switched sides.
Edward goes on to then, a year later in 1305, finally finds and captures Wallace.
Oh.
And he makes a boo-boo. He has him publicly executed.
Yeah.
And he kind of does what he did to Montfort, except he has him hanged, drawn, and quartered. Very famously in the movie Braveheart again, which is pretty accurate. He has him hanged, disemboweled while he's still alive, chopped into 5 pieces, heads mounted in England, and then the other 4 parts are physically like mounted with a nail at posts across Scotland.
Yeah, we get the point.
Yes. This winds up changing the story a little bit for the Scots, because like, wow, he killed Wallace. He killed our freedom fighter. He killed our favorite son. He killed him. He killed Wallace. How dare he? It causes a huge kerfuffle, to say the least.
Yeah.
Robert the Bruce goes from being fairly loyal, like his daddy suggested, because now this is the grandson of the first Robert the Bruce that fought to be the king. Now Robert the Bruce says, nope, this is crap. I've had enough.
Bridge too far.
I've had enough. You bombed that castle after they surrendered. You butchered Wallace, and you've become a super mega tyrant.
Yep.
So Robert the Bruce winds up becoming the head of the rebellion, because Wallace actually said, you should be the guardian of Scotland to him. So now that his friend and confidant got murdered horribly, Robert the Bruce is like, all right, fine.
Yeah.
I'm going to do the right thing. And he becomes the first independent king of Scotland after England took over. So that's the ramifications of this whole thing of Edward the Longshanks, called the Hammer of the Scots, is how he's written in history. Being a bit of a tyrant. If he had just calmed it down a little bit, if he hadn't been so ambitious, he might not have pushed the Scots to just go, all right, that's it, we're done. Time to kill you.
Sounds like he made a lot of good first impulse choices and then changed his mind.
Then he changed his mind, and he did do a lot of mind changing and deal altering. He killed people. Also, can't leave this out. He was the guy who signed the Edict of Expulsion that kicked all the Jews out of England.
I thought we were gonna
You thought you were going to get through a week without the Jews getting screwed over. No! He's the guy who did it. And the Jews were kicked out of England until Oliver Cromwell, the Puritan jerk, took over and said, yeah, let the Jews back in. Which is so weird, because he's like a religious xenophobic zealot that came in and killed a king. And he's like, yeah, the Jews should be allowed back into England. So, ha! I had to get you with that.
Thought we were fine.
Nope.
All right.
Nope. You can't have a Crusader king let the Jews be fine. He didn't butcher him, at least.
Oh, sure. It was fine. I'm sure
But
it was
he
okay
just
for
kicked
them.
him out. He just kicked him out. His dad, however, did kill Jews, and he extorted money.
Well, that was the story of Stirling Castle.
That was Stirling Castle, with a sprinkling of anti-Semitism.
Just at the end there.
Just to drive that home.
If you enjoyed this, like and comment, subscribe. If you have any
Share it.
corrections or comments, comment. Yes, share it all around. Help us out with Patreon there.
Yep.
And tune in next week. Next week we'll be discussing the death of Olivier de
Clisson. And that was in August 2nd?
15?
13.
Oh, 13.
1343.
1343.
So during the... A little bit later.
A little bit later. Same country,
We're
though.
jumping... Well, it's close. It's across the water. just directly across in Western France. Brittany.
I should have
not
thought.
Britain.
He sounded like a French name.
Yeah, it's
All right.
Britain.
We'll find out next week.
Yeah, we're gonna find out. It's a really cool story. I promise. It's a good one. No anti-Semitism. I promise this time. Not. It's gonna be great.
See you next week.
Bye, guys.